The Shadow, the Hydra, Chapter 7 Crime's Strange Lair. From the vestibule of the Monolith Arms, Selber poked his pale face and gave a wary look both ways along the street. 2 nights ago, Selber's manner had been dapper. This evening he looked scared. Maybe his fright at his first meeting with the Shadow was the reason, for Selber's glances were the utmost in suspicion. Each time he studied a darkened patch of street, any of those blotted out segments might be the Shadow. So thought Selber, until he counted so many splotches that he suddenly changed his mind. Quite sure that the Shadow couldn't be around, Selber stole from the doorway and off along the street. His anxious eyes were set straight ahead, as if his fear had become a matter of the future. It would have made no difference if Selber had looked back. The particular clump of darkness that moved did so in a style that no one would have noticed. The solid gloom of a basement doorway seemed simply to surge forward, then spread. Not for an instant did it reveal itself as a cloaked figure in black. Rather it drifted into the surrounding gloom, to be absorbed like a cloud of dispelling smoke. Selber's hurry, his anxiety, both made it easier for the Shadow to stalk him. Turning a corner, Selber threw a furtive glance at a subway entrance in the next block, then decided that he couldn't afford the benefit of a nickel fare. His picture hadn't appeared in the newspapers as one of the victims at Glencoe's house. Though small and a poor photograph, the resemblance might strike some subway rider. A cab was the only vehicle that Selber could safely use, so he took one, which suited the Shadow, because he had stationed the cab for Selber to find. The cab belonged to the Shadow, and its driver was Mo Shrepnitz, one of the Shadow's capable agents. Accepting Selber as a passenger, Shrevey stalled a bit while starting his motor, which gave the Shadow time to enter a cab across the street. The driver of the other cab was quite astonished by a whispered tone that told him to follow the cab ahead, because he'd seen no one enter from the darkness. But the tone wasn't the sort to brook an argument, so the Shadow won his point, while Mo up ahead saw that the trailing cab didn't lose him. Maybe Selber suspected something, for after a dozen blocks he paid Mo off and transferred to another cab. That old trick didn't help him. The Shadow paid off his cabbie and shifted to Mo's waiting cab. From then on, Selber couldn't know that he was trailed, for the Shadow had trained Mo to such business. Mo ducked around through other streets and picked up the trail on another avenue. Sometimes he would get ahead of Selber and let the Shadow check on the other cab. On avenues, Mo would lose his cab from sight behind trucks and buses, while a porpoise mined amid a school of whales. A porpoise. Thus, when Selber reached his goal, the Shadow was still right behind him. On foot, the cloaked trailer merged with a building wall until Selber entered the side door of a large building. After a brief pause, the Shadow took the same route. Singular was Selber's choice of destination. He had picked the promenade of a huge office building that was much like an arcade, with rows of shops on each side. Few of the shops were open in the evening, but there was an arrow ahead that pointed to a door with a sign, Museum of Mechanical Science. The museum was due to close within an hour, hence it was almost deserted. Selber paid 55 cents for admittance and tax to a uniformed gatekeeper, who watched him go through a railed entrance fitted with a photoelectric beam. The recording device gave a sharp click, then another, which caused the gateman to turn in sudden surprise. For the first time in its history, the beam had worked twice, when only one person went through, but the keeper couldn't understand it. He looked toward the beam, then shot a long glance after Selber. Finally, he gazed in other directions, but by then it was too late. As he had boldly stepped from darkness, so had the shadow returned to it, openly visible only when the gentleman's attention was diverted. The shadow had promptly veered into a space behind a huge exhibit case that showed an enlarged mechanism of an automated lock. Silver having gone the other way, the puzzled man at the gate took his first look in the wrong direction, and that was enough for the shadow to complete a glide to cover. Shifting into a deeper corner next to a big case that enclosed a large model of an ocean liner, the shadow watched Selber move around the wall and stop at exhibits whenever other customers came by. At one case, Selber dropped a nickel in a slot and watched a model locomotive run on treadmill tracks. While it was going by, the shadow saw an attendant pause and take a steady look at the drab secretary. Similar, another attendant checked Selber when he was going to an adjacent room. When the shadow followed as soon as the way was clear, whisking into a farther room, the shadow looked back from the doorway to see Selber finishing a quick round of exhibits under the scrutinizing eye of a third attendant. The far room was empty of people, and it lacked suitable cover for the shadow. At one side there were a few steps leading down to a door that bore the sign, Chamber of Marvels. Reaching the door, the shadow was opening it and shifting through when Selber came in sight. Fortunately, the fellow stopped to play with a hand crank movie machine, otherwise he might have caught his first glimpse of the shadow entering the Marvel room. In fact, the shadow was just working the door shut to the slightest crack when Selber left the movie machine and came directly to the Chamber of Marvels itself. Completely closing the door, the shadow turned around. The first thing he saw was a robot standing on a platform against the far wall. It was a large, cumbersome thing, its limbs, body, and head nothing but cylinders of considerably more than human proportions. Hung from its necklace head was a placard reading, Out of Order. Gripping the robot, the shadow found that it came apart. Evidently its machinery had been sent away for repair, for the interior was quite empty. So the shadow stepped into the robot's legs and eased the lightweight body and head down over him. From within the thin-shelled contraption, he peered out through tiny holes that were drilled in to make an ornamental pattern. When Selber entered, the shadow was able to take stock of the room as well as the man, for Selber began a tour of the chamber. It didn't take him long, for the square room was quite small, but its exhibits were highly interesting, all being of a freakish sort. One corner formed a railed square, wherein a huge metal rim was slowly spinning in a mysterious fashion, covering a circle about equal to its own 5-foot diameter. It was obviously controlled by an electromagnet that revolved beneath the floor, but the effect was surprising nevertheless. Selber stared, quite fascinated at this marvel, then moved along. Next was an exhibit case containing a model stratosphere balloon. Selber pressed a button and the balloon inflated with gas to rise to the top of the high case. There a valve was released and the balloon came down again. Another corner contained a combination dredger and sifter. It was much like a full-size scoop seen on a steam shovel, but its edges were like teeth. The thing was used for dredging coal from riverbeds, since the fine particles of coal would sift out through the teeth. This device was in operation each minute. It would open its great steel jaws like Jonah's whale and clamp them shut again. Leaving that corner, Selber passed the robot, giving it a mere glance as he went by. He came to another case containing poisonous gases in their various regents. Here were half a dozen slots, each calling for a nickel for the privilege to see gases travel through spiral tubes and produce bubbles of color changes in glass jars containing liquids of proper chemical contents. Selber didn't waste any nickels. He was turning to the final corner to look at an automatic metal crusher when the door of the marble chamber opened and 3 attendants filed into the room. They were the same trio that eyed Selber during his earlier tour. Each man had a fist slightly clenched and all let their hands come down. In response, Selber spread his hands to give the Hydra signal. Tooth 4A, spoke Selber as soon as the first was closed. Awaiting new assignment. Ear 7C, replied one of the attendants. We have heard from head number 7 telling us to expect you, but not so soon as this. We understood you were on vacation. Selbert nodded. Then, I guess you know all about me, he said. I'm supposed to be dead, so I have to stay out of sight, but my former head, number 4, told me if I didn't hear from him, I'd be transferred to 7. I was to make contact here. The ear knew that such were Selber's orders. He said that he heard from number 7 only a short while ago, and that tooth 7A had been mentioned. Proper arrangements had been made on Selber's account. We're pulling out of here tonight, explained the ear. Our head has rigged a job for us. We're going to clean out the Paragon Trust Co. sometime tomorrow. You'll come back here then? Inquired Selber. No, said the ear. The museum won't be staying open evenings, so we're no longer needed. The head was just waiting until we could quit. Working here was soft for us and saved expenses. Besides, we were ready to help anybody in a pinch like you. With that, the ear gestured to the robot that formed the Shadow's hiding place. We took the guts out of old Roger, continued the ear, so we could use him to hold a stowaway. The out-of-order sign is so people wouldn't bother him. If you'd come racing in here, we'd have piled you and Roger, clamped the catches tight, and chucked away the sign. The guy inside can do the robot act as good as any machinery. You tell Roger to raise his right hand. He does simple stuff like that. The Shadow resisted the impulse to prove that Roger was an obedient robot. Selber gave the metal man a stare, as though glad he hadn't been called upon for robot duty. Then the ear was plucking Selber's arm, gesturing to a device that stood on a table between the gas case and the crusher. The thing looked like an ordinary radio set, but it was labeled Radio Mixer, hands off. You'd better talk with Head 7 direct, the ear told Selber. Make it short, though. We're closing the dump soon. Selber began to thumb the dials of the mixer. One of the attendants showed him a hidden switch that started the whir. Another turned to the ear and asked him if he wanted to turn off the perpetual lamp, which was an object like a gas jet burning in a glass cylinder on a shelf above the radio mixer. The ear shook his head. He said the perpetual lamp could burn out for all he cared, since this was their last night on duty. With that, the ear gestured his companions through the door behind him. Gas jet burning into a gas cylinder on a shelf above the radio mixer. The ear shook his head. He said the perpetual lamp could burn out for all he cared, since this was their last night on duty. With that, the ear gestured his companions out through the door behind them, leaving Selber to hold a private interview with his new head, an interview that would be overheard by Roger the robot in the person of the Shadow.